In our era podcast with Ragnar and Tina. We're excited to talk about hosted agents today. Hi, Tina.
Hi, Ragnar. I am so excited for episode 4. I wanted to start with AI concept of the week. And before I tell you what my concept is, I first want to tell you a story. So let's say in this imaginary story, I have just bought my very first autonomous car. And I'm super excited. I'm going to drive it for the first time. So obviously, I get in, there's no steering wheel, right? There's just a screen. So I log in with my credentials and I press the start button and it asks me, am I allowed to start? And I go, yes, of course, silly. I press the start button, and it starts driving. First thing it has to do is it has to turn left out of my driveway. So then it asks me, am I allowed to turn left? And I go, yes, turn left. Okay. Then it turns left. It gets to the first stop sign and it says, am I allowed to turn left? And I go, yes. So I realize there's a button that says always allow left turns. So I go, okay, always allow left turns. Now I'm driving around, it's doing all of the left turns. At one point it gets to a traffic sign and it says, am I allowed to stop at this traffic sign? And I think, yes, you have to. But before I can press the allow button, it asks me to log in again. So now I have to log in, but I also need to press allow. And
Yeah.
my whole dream of having an autonomous car is completely gone because I'm just clicking on allow all. To get to work, I need to press on it 50 times. I feel like that is how we are driving AI agents today. My concept of the week is agentic authentication because I feel like it's just gotten out of hand. The more I try to automate, the more I'm just clicking on allow, allow, allow. How about you? Have you run into this issue?
That's fascinating. It's actually like a really nice way to showcase because AI cars have to be very safe. So we are also afraid of agents doing a lot of crazy things. So we put this security layer, but then it's causing like real user experience issues. People are like frustrated to use them because of, hey, I'm asking every time something new, I have to allow. Yeah, I've been
Exactly.
through the same thing. Also, I have a similar story for the driving thing, which is I've been driving Tesla for like a lot of years now, 2014. I remember every time a new feature came, I used to say accept. So which was autopilot first.
Mhm.
So autopilot was fine, it used to drive. Then came in taking exits. And I was on a road trip to Vancouver from Boston, so it's a very long trip. So I was like, this would make my life so easy. It can take the exit itself. You know what I learned the first time? It was taking the exit of 60 miles an hour because they turning, but they didn't enable the speed limit monitoring. Because when you take the exit out,
Whoa.
you have to take. So I was getting so scared. It used to brake when it realized the turn is way more curved than it
Yeah.
anticipated. But I used to like go. So when you go in the leading edge, you're doing something crazy as well. But I remember those days when it used to also say, "Can I will stop at the stop signs from now on." That was like amazing. But when things work, I use it all the time now, wherever I am, traffic lights, stop lights. It does way better job. And the funniest story is this is literally happened today morning. My wife took my car. And then my car gave a report saying, yesterday you used emergency brakes. So my wife comes home back and says, like, were you not driving safe? Why did it has to brake for you? It's also giving reports to my wife now. But that's a great concept.
Oh, wow. It's ratting you out.
Yeah, my evals are not running well.
No, clearly.
Uh,
To get back to the agentic authentication, actually, you showed me how to solve that this week. So now on the agents that I'm running, instead of just prompting them through the command line, I changed the setting from command to autopilot, and then you can allow all. So now I've basically allowed all. So I'm going to now be in this Tesla situation where it speeds off the off ramps without slowing down. And I'll just have to learn that as it goes, but hopefully I won't crash.
that's great. Okay, to exactly solve your problem, you know what's my topic of the week?
Tell me.
It's called harness engineering. So let's say you built all of this. Even if you built all, how does harness engineering solve that? we've been using, like, I don't want to use the word like naked agents in a way, like LLMs, because we just rely on them. If you go to ChatGPT and ask something, it just gives you whatever it thinks. There is no harnessing around what it is for you. But how can you build harnesses? First thing is we started learning to use context, right? So we added context to our prompt so it knows what answer you're expecting back, maybe. Then we added tools, which is MCPs and other things. But the other thing is, we'll talk, and I really want to make a video on Agentic OS for how we are building as a team. So orchestration is the really big piece where now we have multiple agents working together. Even in your car, so example, there are cameras looking left and right and front and back. They're all talking to each other. That's the orchestrator telling what is happening around the car. So orchestration is going to be one other thing. So these are all things we thought they were like individual components. But if you put them as a harness around any agent that you're building, that's nothing but a harness engineering. And the other three things are memory, safety, and evals. So memory is something that came recently, it's been taking off. Harness engineering is nothing but when you build an agent, how do you harness it to make sure it follows all these things to be safe without taking a 60-mile-an-hour ramp exit or deleting something that you
Yes.
don't want it to delete.
I love that. And I think that really brings us to the topic of hosted agents, because with hosted agents, a lot of that is out of the box.
Yes, Tina. Yeah, definitely hosted agents in Microsoft Foundry are the things I'm very excited as well. But I also know that these are like three stacked words people are hearing with agents in the middle.
A hosted agent is an agent that's running code. And I think we'll focus today on Foundry hosted agent. So in this case, it's running in Foundry as a managed service. And it's basically just an autonomous system that runs in the cloud, and it's designed to automate any complex workflow and task without user supervision. So the idea is you write the logic and then package it in a container, and then Foundry handles this kind of hosting and everything that is built around it to allow the agent to run.
Okay, so the keyword is code here. Like previously, we just wrote instructions and thought about that, but they could not scale. It's instead of a prompt sitting in a portal, these are the agents that have real application style behavior that can scale, orchestrate, and use APIs.
Yes, and I love the word that you used earlier when you said a naked agent. So basically just, interacting with an LLM without really having anything, that provides it any other context or features. And yeah, I love that you call that a prompt agent. A prompt agent is like just giving someone an instruction card, right? And say, hey, follow these things. Whereas if you have a hosted agent, it's more like hiring someone who has all of this um, context and ability around them to do work, right? So it would be like an operator has a workspace, tools, identities, logs, can follow processes. I'd rather say it's like hiring a team of operators, because these agents can usually also scale up and down. So you can have an agent team that does more or less work depending on how much you need.
That's a good distinction. And I I also agree, like prompt agents are more for like quick creation. I know we keep coming up with different names to explain the same thing sometimes, but I like what you mentioned, which is hosted agents are for those when agents become software. They become actually more than just an agent and they can perform actions. And I also like what you said, scaling. People haven't realized how the scaling really matters. We have been all just building like agent for my team or just you or me, but when you start thinking of an enterprise scale and you want to scale agents to run for 100,000 users, this is a great solution, I think.
The question is, why should anyone care about hosting them in the cloud or hosting them in Foundry? Is there any reason to specifically put them within this hosted managed system?
I mentioned earlier, the local demos do not survive like the real contact with production. Once an agent matters and it goes live, you need the identity, deployment, versioning, logs. All these things are going to be very important as a platform. And then that is where Foundry platform helps with that hosted agents. On Copilot Studio and other agents as well as Claude, we are all trying to build it within like our own tenant, maybe that would work. But as soon as you expose it to outside, how does it work is where hosted agents come into the picture.
Yeah, and I think what is interesting about Foundry is that it was built from the ground up for agents, right? So it's a sort of agent native platform.
Yes, that's what the Foundry is. I love that we changed from AI Foundry to just Microsoft Foundry now. So it's the platform for us for anything related to AI. You can host the code anywhere, container apps, AKS, or app services, but they're all nothing but agents. So Foundry hosted agents are different in a small way because if a container is registered as an agent, Foundry understands it as an agent. So you can bring in 5 agents and create it into a package and things like that. It's not just a web app anymore. It turns it into like an agentic app.
Yes, and I think that also means you can manage it through the Foundry portal, right? So you can invoke it like an agent, you can monitor it, you can connect it to you can observe it, and you can do like the whole agent life cycle within Foundry.
Yeah. So Tina, I want to know what gets deployed. I know you've done some demos for us. I'm excited to see. But under the hood, does hosted agent container as an image? How does that work?
So what do you do is you just write the code, and you define the metadata, and then I think Foundry runs it. At least for me, all of these things are happening under the hood. So I'll show you how easy it is to create an agent, but I don't actually know what's happening in the back end.
Okay. So that's fascinating because I know we've been using CLIs to build these agents. We never go into like real web UI base anymore. So I'm pretty like me and Tina have been building agents for a lot of our customers. We built everything on agent.yaml file anyways. So that tells that Foundry is also using the same thing, the same protocol, but now it has that CPU and memory that we do not have control of if you built it in somewhere else or a local system.
That's interesting. What about the protocol?
Yeah, so most protocols in a lot of our conversational agents use a response protocol, right? So if you need more custom workflow, you might use something called invocations. But the big idea here is Foundry needs a consistent way to call these containers. So you need to have that not only when we're speaking about like a large container of users using this agent across like 100,000 users using the agent, it also needs to understand a lot of things that can scale together. So that's where the Foundry will shine, and hosted agents are going to be a key thing for us to become agentic as we're speaking in our podcast in the AI era.
Okay, so I understand you're writing something custom, but the way that it interacts with the outside world is consistent and basically clean.
Exactly. So freedom inside that container is what we are doing, like the harness that we are saying. Everything lives within that boundary, but outside it can scale to how many ever users and requests that you need. Sometimes you can have a hosted agent that runs 24/7. It's looking at all the data points that are happening across the time, and then it can give you reports. And no company is going to use only agents 9 to 5, right? So that is where these hosted agents will come into picture, in my view.
Okay. So then I still want to ask you, when do you make a, let's say, a naked agent or an agent that is can just do prompting versus an agent that is hosted on something like Foundry?
So we'll go back to the prompt agent style because I'm really interested in that response protocol now that we are speaking. So use a prompt agent when a work is mostly like model, instructions, and tools. So these are the 3 things that you're doing. You don't worry about, hey, I'm going to run like 100,000 lines or at a time, or 100,000 people are going to jump on that assistant to book something. So something like a simple assistant or a knowledge helper or a quick prototype is something a prompt agent can do.
I guess also something that is a help bot in a website or something, right? That's a typical prompt agent where you're just asking questions and it's responding that the office is not currently open or that there's another branch close to you. Okay, so that's a simple example. What about hosted agents?
I think your example is way better, but I'm going to explain in my own small way, which is You could use hosted agents when the agent needs to behave like a real service. I think that's the key here. We all work with a lot of applications today. They all work as a service for us, and we don't realize how much backend work is happening in terms of scaling and all the things. I'm pretty confident, like everyone has heard the news of Netflix. Like sometimes it's a great platform, but when it has to do live events, the streaming is not the same. But when you're an individual person watching a show, you never see the difference. They're still doing the same work, but there is a huge difference between a live event showcasing versus showcasing something that they have created as a show, right? So live events are very hard even for Netflix. But YouTube has been building this for a long time now. So think of that as if you use a hosted agent, when the agent needs to behave like this live agentic scenario that I'm saying. So it has maybe custom code, deterministic logic, that framework orchestration that will expand as the user requests come in. It uses the same MCP client, same API calls, and same file handling, but it has that logic to go multi-step processes, as well as it can use different processes to go scale on its own as you need it.
Okay. So if I'm making a frequently asked question bot, I'm going to do a prompt agent, right?
Exactly. That's all you need in that scenario.
And then if I want to make a complicated process that it might connect to other systems, regularly do checks, apply some policies, have to do tool calls and then do some actions, then I might go towards a hosted agent.
Yes, like a bank service is a really key thing, right? So how many transactions happen? And we are thinking like, oh, it's all built on the code anyways, but in future, what if it's all agent driven? Agents know which transaction you're doing, where you're traveling, why you are getting billed from South Africa or New Zealand within 2 days, right? So it knows and it understands those. So that's where hosted agents would shine for such large operations where they're working with large number of customers.
Can you talk a bit about how do you get these things into production?
We are in preview now, but the deeper story here is hosted agents are how you move from agent demo for your team or agents for your teams to agent for public or market, real market scenarios is what I would say.
Demos are easy. Getting agents to really run on production scale is the challenge.
Yes. And every time I meet a customer, that's the first thing they ask is, hey, this
Mhm.
works for me and this works in UAT for 10 people, but can this run for my whole company? Can this run for, let's say, 10, like 50 people are working together? That's all what they are asking. But we are looking at the industry where everyone is expecting to go to a website and have an agent answer something. So in those scenarios, if you launch a product or something, you need to make sure it runs repeatedly, safely, and also observability is going to be one other thing that you will add into those agents.
Absolutely. I mean, you're going to want to see logs. You're going to want to see the versions, right? You're going to have options to move between environments, do rollbacks, manage identity permissions, right? Like this is really going to be a serious piece of software in your company, and you're going to treat it like that.
Yeah. And previously we mentioned the response protocol, right, Tina? And here what I can say is it's like it runs in this isolation thing, which means hosted agents are run on the session based. So they create every session can run its own CPUs if it needs, or based on the task it's doing, it can scale on its own. So each interaction can be run on its own managed sandbox session. So that matters when agent handles files, let's say, or user context. Let's say you're doing your tax season, right? All these files people are uploading, those are all going to need its own sandbox and runs its own session. It has that user context and all the long tool calls maybe or workflows that it has to do. So those are all the things it needs to know, because if for my example, if I'm uploading files, it should know not only that my files are how to read them, but also it should know I live in New York, my employer is in Redmond. So all the tax details, it needs to do all those workflows in order to help me.
Yes, I love what you mentioned about the session management. When I'm building an agent now, just on my local machine, I have one folder. I put everything that's relevant in that folder, and then I open a command terminal there, right? And then I use GitHub Copilot to make an agent that can do things on these files. But of course, it's just me, and it's just on my local file server. And obviously, that's not the way that you can design enterprise agents that are running in the cloud, right? Like each user should have their own files, it should be separated, right? So that you don't have information leaking or oversharing from the agent. Session management is an interesting part of the hosted agents because it's not that easy to do within your own file system if you're just building an agent within your own desktop.
Exactly. And also, people don't realize sometimes we are all building so many agents. I have 5 or 7 VS codes running at the same time, which means each project has its own like session memory. But also, the infrastructure piece is I had to buy a new Mac Mini just for that reason. I had to buy 128 gigabits of RAM, right? So if you are noticing your VS Code slowing down and all, you'll start realizing, okay, it's not about the model thing, it's more about my infrastructure that I have on my own. What hosted agents will bring is they will not let you worry about the infrastructure. If a task needs more memory or more GPU, it will assign it on the fly. And that's why I really think that real infrastructure from Foundry and all is going to win that scenario that we do not have in other areas.
What ingredients do you need to make a hosted agent actually work?
This is a nice question because I know to do this demo, me and Tina were working on setting this whole thing. And there are a lot of pieces, but hopefully all of this will be solved. My suggestion is to use the Foundry CLI that will help you guide to set all these things. But the main things you need are the Foundry project, a model deployment. So I think Tina is going to show us different models that are available. An Azure container registry, like we mentioned, the containers can scale. And then agents capability host, that is all you need in order to host it on the Foundry as a resource.
The capability to host is important, right?
There are two common blocks I found myself, which is like RBAC. You need to have like the right Azure AI roles. So we're going to show the demo, but there are a lot of things you need to know in order to do this. So please look at the learn articles and other things that we'll post in below to understand, am I the right owner? Me and Tina were struggling because we created our own container, our own project, but then we can't create our agents in our own resources that we created. But these are all like things that we are learning as we go. We'll share some of these experiences as we go as well.
Yes. So yeah, if you can't create agents, don't assume it's just the permissions. There's multiple things.
The way I go with it is like I have a simple mental model, which is what is the main thing I need in order to do something. In my view, hosted agents are containers that Foundry understands as agents. We used to have containers before. Now we are just shifting that mindset of a group of agents in a container is nothing but Foundry understands them as agents.
So it's not just run my container, but it's more like run my agent as a Foundry managed asset.
Exactly. So, Tina, should we jump into the demo then?
This is Foundry Managed Agents. They're quite new. We'll put the announcement down in the description below. I have it currently open on a project called In Our AI Era Hosted Agents. This is the homepage, and I'm just going to hit build so that I could build agents here. One thing that is interesting about Foundry is that you can choose which models you want to use. These are the ones that are currently deployed, but I can make my own models, right? So you could train your own models for a very specific use case. Or if you want, you could install any of these models that are in the catalog. The catalog is interesting not just because it gives you all of these options for models, but also because you can see kind of how the models work. So for example, if I go into this Microsoft model and I can check what it's good at, I can see the technical specs, how much it will cost, and I can also see benchmarks. So here you can see how good it is at photorealistic images or how good it is at generating art compared to other similar image models.
I also like the one on the right side, Tina, which was you can even with the existing models instead of fine tuning. What we could do is when you hit a deploy, you can actually change settings. You can either go with the default setting or you can change the temperatures and things in your custom settings. And the other thing that Tina mentioned already is in Microsoft Foundry, we have so many models. So you not always have to go for a latest model. In my view, Tina, every company will have a model that is tuned for them at a certain level. That is going to do a lot of the work. The latest models are more important for people like you and me who's testing and doing evals and doing all the things. But in most cases, a lot of these small models should help a lot of the agents we build.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about agents. So if I go back here to the build section, I can see here already a couple of agents that we created. I'm going to hit create agent, and I'm going to create an agent which we'll call the in our AI era weekly AI prep researcher. This is not just an agent that like gets us information for the podcast. So it's like a deep researcher that will do all of the preparation and collect all of the articles and news that's happening in the AI world for the week. So let's hit create. I've already written some instructions for it, and it will, based on these instructions, produce a show preparation for us that we could go through. But basically, it prepares the AI concept of the week. It then does research based on the topic that I will give it, also specific output format. And then basically, I can just hit save, and it will already have an agent that works on this. So I can hit preview, preview agent. Then we can just say today's topic is boundary agents. Or this week, the topic is Foundry agents. And then let's see what it will produce. It will start to like generate this markdown file based on the instructions that it have to explain different parts. Here it has different AI stories. It's gotten recent news with model updates, and it also collected all of the resources.
Yeah, and some of the agents that Tina has in the backend, we are using it for a lot more complex things. It looks at all the Reddit and all the things, and it understands each one's perspective to help us understand the noise from reality sometimes.
You've seen what it looks like. If I'm a maker or an architect or a product person, how do I decide if I want to spend some time learning this?
All of this really needs you to build a simple prompt agent first. So start with the simplest surface that works. If a prompt agent solves the problem, use it. If the agent needs more complex things, or if you think it can be run better with a code or a custom orchestration or an enterprise integration, that's when you need to start thinking of what is this behavior going to look like in production. And that is when I think I suggest you to going to hosted agents.
And you also should take into account that you're going to need all of these setup. The more complicated agent you're going to build, the more setup you're going to require. So also decide if that is actually necessary before you jump in.
Yeah, the boring steps are the most critical because currently our agents are building as agents. So Tina has Tina Agentic OS, I have Ragnar Agentic OS. Our agents are doing the thing. But to build what we needed, it was a lot of boring work. We had to train our local agents to understand exactly what we do. So please do not skip the boring step, but there are ways to accelerate that as well. Maybe we'll talk about it sometime.
Yes, absolutely. And remember that the demo is just Spark, but then when you start building the agents, that's going to be a fire, right? So make sure that you keep the fire controlled and that it's used to do good and not to burn down the whole organization.
That's the main point here for us too, right? Like which is hosted agents are not just about creating agents, like you go low code agent or something. Hosted agents are more about thinking of how are these agents going to operate in the real world for us. What is the difference between a cool prototype that runs for 20 people maybe to running across 10,000 or 100,000 people that a business can trust? So hopefully this gave you guys an idea. Like Tina mentioned, it's a spark. I think her example is going to help us to think in a different way.
If you have any questions, let us know down below and we'll answer them in a future episode. Also, remember to subscribe so you can see us answer your question.
So thanks for watching then. Have a great day and we'll post more soon. Bye.
Bye.